This is Jason Bittner from Triple Helix Corporation, and welcome to our Helix Insider Podcast. I'm joined in studio today by two of my colleagues, Andy Webster, who is our senior web developer for Triple Helix, and Sean Coover, who is our systems engineer for Triple Helix. Welcome to the studio, guys. So today we're going to be talking to you guys about the importance of backups and why it really matters. This is a topic that I think everyone can kind of understand and appreciate. But it's a little bit more to it than just, hey, making sure your files are backed up in case something bad happens to your computer so you can get them back kind of thing. There's actually quite a bit to this, so we'd like to walk you through it. So Andy, just for our listeners, let's start with the importance of backups and why it's important.
Yeah, so in this day and age, pretty much all your data is in electronic form, mostly. Like people have like tax documents, bank statements, stuff like that. But also just like important stuff like pictures of your kids. And the older you get, the more the more important data you accumulate is what I find. And so it's just for personal data. First of all, it's important to back up, but also in terms of like business data, it's just very important to back that up because that's time spent and that's work that you're gonna have to do again if you lost that. So in a sense, it's good to be a data pack rat in that sense, which is what I refer to myself as. Yeah, so we want to perform our backups on like a pretty regular basis, I would say, just because you never know when something's going to happen. You never know when your power is going to go out. Lightning surge could blow up your hard drive or something like that. Or just hard drives don't last forever. I've had plenty of them go in my life, and I've had some that had held on for surprisingly long periods of time, but that's basically like storing your important documents in an old rotting shed kind of thing. So
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. Now, not all backups are actually the same, and they're not all created equal. Sean, why don't you walk us through what different types of backups are out there, and what kind of devices we back up?
There's definitely several different types of backups that are available out there. When you talk businesses, there's incremental backups versus server backups. Server backups are typically images of the entire server that are stored off premise so that you can restore the whole server. Then there's also incremental backups of your data, so that when you should be on a rolling incremental status, so where usually on a daily basis you should be backing up your crucial data. You could do it on an incremental basis where only the new data that's been stored gets backed up to the off premise. And there's also there's cloud versus cold storage, which I think we'll speak more about that in a little bit. Incremental versus your full system backups. You want to make sure you have at least a daily, a weekly, and a monthly for your server images. But all of your incremental data, your databases, all your server files, you should be doing that on an incremental status, and that should be going to some sort of cloud storage if you don't have your own cold storage solution. And cold storage solutions are sort of not the best way to go anymore, but it is a good solution for personal uses. But for business uses, you definitely want to have both.
So let's talk a little bit now about disaster recovery, because there's really no point in making a backup if you don't know your backups are working. And so Andy, talk to us a little bit about like the importance of testing backups and why that's very, very important.
most times, you're not doing your backups manually, so the server is kind of doing it for you, and so you do want to check in every so often just to make sure that you didn't have like an update that broke something, and you think you have 7 days back of data, and then something happens and you go to look at your backup and it's like, oh, actually we don't have a backup. Or you load it up and it's like 3 days ago or something like that instead of yesterday. So that's like pretty much every developer system admin's nightmare, is when you need to have a backup and it's not actually there. So yeah, so good practice to just periodically check in and try to take your backup and move, load it into something just to see if it's actually working.
That's an excellent point because I remember back in the day, like we had clients that were using these old antiquated tape backup systems. In fact, some people still use this. And for our listeners, a tape backup is similar to like a cassette tape that it's magnetic, and you would load the tape into the device and it would go through and it would like systematically back up. And it wasn't instantaneous. It would actually take quite a while, maybe a few hours. And what these customers of ours were doing is they were backing up to this tape, but they would never test it. And so at one point, the worst case scenario happened where their primary server failed and they went back to the tape to try to recover it, and realizing that they had been backing up empty tapes for the last 10 years and they had nothing. It was the doomsday scenario. So the importance of testing backups just can't be understated. And related to that, we're also aware that, backups technology has really evolved over the years. And Sean was talking about this. I'm going to come back to you, Sean. Is that, I mean, instead of doing tapes, we're now recommending something that goes completely out the building into the cloud. And, my recollection of cloud storage in the early days for backups, it was quite expensive. So a lot of folks just didn't do it. It was cheaper to have your own tape or your own systems on premise. But nowadays, because storage is so cheap, we really recommend putting your data in the cloud. Sean, why don't you talk to our listeners about like the importance of the cloud backups and how easy and accessible, and moreover, what it means for our listeners personally as well as for their businesses.
Like I said before, cloud storage has been evolving very rapidly. The cost of storage has been decreasing and plummeting really. These 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte SSDs, which are so much faster than HDDs, are going for cheap. So businesses are setting up huge clouds that are all redundant with huge RAID arrays, and they're able to, with the cost of storage and the cost of data transfer coming down, they're able to offer cheaper rates on cloud storage. As I said, experts are starting to recommend cloud storage more than just cold storage.
Sean, what's cold storage? I don't believe we've defined that.
Cold storage is where you take like an external hard drive, or as you were mentioning, the tapes. You plug it into your computer. You drop your data in there, and you unplug it, and you put it in a drawer somewhere. That's cold storage.
So it's unaccessible after you've stored it, basically.
Right. It's not on. It's not accessible. So the hardware doesn't have as much wear and tear until you plug it back in if you need that data again. But that's a manual process too. You have to manually do that, just like the tapes.
So you mentioned RAID. What is RAID exactly?
A RAID is a redundant array of independent disks. It's a server card where you plug multiple hard drives into it, and there's multiple different levels of RAID, like 10 and 5. But it makes sure that if a hard drive fails in this array, they can take it out and put it back in and not lose any data whatsoever.
Right, because it's actually writing the data simultaneously to multiple drives, right, Sean?
Yes, it's writing the data to multiple drives. Like a RAID 1 is a mirror where you have one hard drive over here and another hard drive over here, both connected. The same data is being written to both of them. So if one fails, you can pull it out and put the other one back in. So we have companies having dedicated entire department and lots of resources to creating these huge cloud storage implementations, and they're getting pretty cheap. Google's Drive, Microsoft OneDrive. There's several others out there that are really cheap. You can I think Apple has iCloud for $10 a month for 2 terabytes. So cloud storage is getting really cheap. In the long run, cold storage is cheaper, but you just don't get the redundancy with cold storage that you get with cloud storage, because they have entire teams that are dedicated to maintaining those servers.
And from a practical purpose, we always tell our clients that they should be doing some sort of redundant storage, not only for their business, but actually for their personal, because as you mentioned, the different softwares that are out there, the iClouds and the Google Drives and the whatnot are so cheap. There's really no excuse not to do that. But it does take a little bit of effort to set it up initially, because in a lot of these softwares, what you'll do is you'll point at a directory on your machine, or even like say the entire machine's hard drive, and say, hey, when I make a change, back this up and throw the file out on the cloud. And so you have that redundancy, but it's automated and it's done for you.
Companies are actually starting to make that even easier, like Apple and Microsoft, iCloud and OneDrive. If you like for Windows, Microsoft OneDrive, if you save a file on your computer, it goes to OneDrive if you have a OneDrive account. Same for Apple on your Mac OS. If you save a file and you have iCloud, it saves to iCloud. They're getting almost instantaneous with this. Dropbox takes a little bit more time than instantaneous, but some of these companies are really going for instant.
Right, right. Back in the day, I actually started with Carbonite, which is a really decent backup service. Initially, it's interesting that Carbonite was one of the few companies that did instantaneous save. That's not true anymore, but they were very favored initially because when you did save your file, it would go immediately to their cloud archive, whereas a Dropbox at the time, it wasn't instantaneous. It might take an hour or two before it was finally synced. But to your point, I mean, it's all instantaneous now, and there's just a huge wealth of options for businesses and individuals to use.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of options for everyone to use. So I always recommend that everyone should have redundant backups. Do some cold storage. Have an external hard drive where you dump all your personal data there at, but also have some sort of cloud storage solution so that in the case of something like a house fire or God forbid a flood or something like that, your cold storage devices may get damaged. So there's always that threat. So it's always a good idea to look into cloud storage.
I see we're getting actually close to the end of our time here. Just before we sign off, any final thoughts? Back to you, Andy.
Just it's not too hard to storage personally. I mean, I know that it's to me it's very important because I have pictures of my kids that I don't want to lose. That's like those are things that are irreplaceable. And as well as just your business data. It's just oftentimes I think we don't think of electronic data as being as important as it is because I don't know, maybe that's just me having come through that period of time. But where things were everything was written down and now everything's in the cloud. But it's just as important as those tax documents that you have written on paper. So make sure you have a plan.
Right, for sure. Sean, how about you? Final thoughts?
My final thought is that redundancy is key. There's going to be issues at some point. You're going to have hard drive failures. If you have a computer, you're going to have phone failures, stuff like that. Hardware goes bad, so it's always important to have redundant backups of all your important data. Like I have pictures of my kids too, and I have important tax documents. I have all sorts of personal important data that I need to make sure that I have always. So redundancy is key. So I have cloud storage and cold storage, and it's best to have both. And if you're really paranoid or really want to get into backups, you could have two cloud storage options like Google Drive and OneDrive. I mean, I have two, so but that's just me. I'm very paranoid about my data. I'm a systems engineer is what I do.
Yeah, for sure, man. Okay, well, thank you. I want to thank my two guests, Sean Cougar and Andy Webster, for joining me today in studio. And this is our Helix Insider Podcast. Till next time. Bye, everybody.